All right, ready to dive in. Today we're exploring something you probably don't think about too much, but it's always working for you. Your stomach.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Not just what it digests, but the actual mechanics of how it all works.
Exactly. The how is really fascinating.
Like behind the scenes of your digestion.
Most people take it for granted, but when you understand the complexity of gastric motility,
Which is, just to clarify,
a fancy way of saying how your stomach moves, it's remarkable.
it is. And we're going to break down some really cool insights based on Dr. Rasha Eldeeb's work. I'm already geeking out.
Oh yeah, there's some really good stuff in there.
Like, did you know your stomach has a whole cleaning routine when it's empty?
Oh yeah, the migrating motor complex.
Wild, right? But before we get to that, let's start with, well,
The basics, the structure.
the stomach is basically a three-part chamber, right?
Right. Each with a specific job. You've got the fundus at the top.
Okay, so like, what does that do?
Think of it like a relaxed storage container for the food you just ate.
Makes sense.
Then there's the corpus or body in the middle.
And that's where things start moving.
Yeah, that's where the mixing really gets going.
Okay, so it's not just holding the food, it's actively processing it.
Absolutely. Then you've got the antrum at the bottom, which is like a powerful grinder, churning and pulverizing everything.
Oh, wow, so the food's getting quite a workout in there.
It is. And before it moves on to the small intestine, what's really cool is that the muscle thickness is different in each section, perfectly suited to their job.
So the fundus is like,
Relax, like a stretchy bag. While the antrum,
has way stronger muscles, right?
you got it, built for those intense contractions.
So it's almost like a gradient of activity getting more intense as the food moves down.
Exactly. And then between the stomach and the small intestine, you've got the pylorus.
Oh, right, like a gatekeeper.
It's a muscular valve that controls the flow of food, making sure only the properly processed stuff gets through.
Smart system. And all this is controlled by,
A complex network of nerves both within the stomach itself and connecting to the brain.
it's like a high-tech control system, making sure everything runs smoothly.
It really is. And speaking of smooth running, you mentioned that housekeeping routine earlier, the MMC.
Yeah, what's that all about?
Well, it kicks in when your stomach is empty, sweeping out any leftover food and preventing bacterial overgrowth.
So it's like a self-cleaning mechanism.
Basically, yeah. It's triggered by a hormone called motilin.
So even when we're not eating, our stomach is busy at work.
Always.
Wow. What happens when we do eat, though? Does the MMC just stop?
It does, yeah.
And then what?
Your stomach shifts gears. Storage, mixing, and controlled emptying are the big ones.
Okay, so break it down for us. How does that work?
It all starts with receptive relaxation.
Receptive, huh? Sounds peaceful.
It is. Think of the fundus, that stretchy top part, expanding to accommodate the food.
Like a balloon.
Yeah, like a balloon inflating, but without increasing the pressure.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does it actually work? Like, what makes it do that?
It's the vagus nerve, mainly. It's a major communication pathway between the brain and the gut.
Oh, wow. So the brain's involved even in this.
Big time. And then there are inhibitory neurotransmitters, too.
Neural what?
They're basically chemicals like VIP, dopamine, and nitric oxide.
Okay, I've heard of dopamine.
They essentially tell the fundus muscles to relax, make room.
Interesting. So it's not just stretching, it's actively moving the food along, too.
Right. And after a while, you get tonic contractions that gently push the food down towards the antrum.
To the antrum, okay, our mixing zone.
Exactly. And things get a lot more intense in the antrum. The body of the stomach creates these rhythmic contractions called mixing waves.
Mixing waves.
Yeah. And they get stronger as they reach the antrum. Picture a wave pool that gets wilder as you go further in.
Oh, I see. That makes sense.
And then there's this process called retropulsion.
Retro what now?
It's where the waves actually force some of the food backward.
Backwards. Why?
So it ensures thorough mixing and breakdown of the food.
Wow, so it's like super thorough.
Like a really good blender, yeah, making sure everything is perfectly smooth.
So what determines how quickly the stomach empties? Does everything move through at the same rate?
Not at all. There are a bunch of factors at play, like the type of food is a big one.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. What about it?
Well, for example, liquids empty much faster than solids.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense.
And among solids, the easily digestible ones, like simple carbs.
Like white bread or something.
Exactly. Those will empty quicker than the ones that are harder to break down, like fiber.
Right, so like a big salad probably takes longer to empty than a bowl of cereal.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's fat. Fat takes the longest to digest.
So that's why a greasy meal makes you feel sluggish.
It is. It's not just the type of food either.
What else affects it?
The amount you eat matters too. Moderate distension, meaning your stomach is stretched a bit.
Ah, so eating a good amount helps things move.
Actually, yeah, it speeds up emptying. But if you overeat and it gets too full,
It slows down, right? Like it's saying, whoa, hold on.
exactly. Your stomach knows its limits.
That's pretty impressive. It's smart.
It's an amazing system, and it gets even more interesting when we consider how the stomach talks to the next part of the digestive system,
Wait, it talks. To what?
to the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine.
Whoa, they have a whole conversation going on.
They do. It's called the enterogastric reflex, and it means the duodenum can actually tell the stomach to slow down.
Oh, wow. So it's like, hey, I'm full over here. Hold up.
Exactly, like that. It uses hormones to communicate, things like CCK, GIP, and secretin.
So it's not just about the stomach itself. It's about this whole system working together.
Right, and you know what else plays a role?
What?
Emotions. Have you ever noticed stress or anxiety messing with your stomach?
Oh, absolutely. Butterflies, indigestion, the whole 9 yards.
That's your emotional state directly impacting your digestive system. Like fear and depression tend to delay gastric emptying, while excitement can speed it up.
Wow. So a happy stomach is a fast emptying stomach.
In a nutshell, yeah. But we can't forget about the other side of things. Vomiting. We talked about the stomach controlling the flow of food.
Yeah, but what happens when things go wrong? Like food poisoning or something?
That's where vomiting comes in. It's like a safety mechanism.
The emergency exit.
Exactly. A way for your body to get rid of something harmful.
Okay, so walk us through it. How does it actually happen?
Well, it starts with nausea. You know, that queasy feeling.
Yeah, you definitely know something's up when you feel that.
It usually comes with salivation, sweating, changes in blood flow.
Ugh, not
Then
not-
comes retching.
Just a dry heave.
Yeah, exactly. Like your body's doing a test run.
If the trigger is strong enough, then you reach the main event. Emesis, which is vomiting itself.
Right, where the contents of your stomach and sometimes even the small intestine are forcefully expelled.
And how does that happen?
Your body takes a deep breath, closes the glottis to protect your airway, and then the diaphragm contracts really hard, creating negative pressure that pulls everything upward.
Wow, that's a lot of coordinated effort.
It is. And all in a matter of seconds. But keep in mind, while simple vomiting is usually harmless, if it's severe or happens a lot,
It can cause problems, right?
yeah, things like dehydration and electrolyte imbalance.
So it's definitely something to pay attention to.
Definitely. It is. And we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah, we haven't even talked about gastric acid secretion yet.
Oh, right. That's what helps break down food, isn't it?
Exactly. Gastric acid, which is mostly hydrochloric acid, is produced by these specialized cells in the stomach lining.
Okay, and what does it do?
It's essential for digestion. Think of it as like a chemical demolition crew,
Demolition crew.
breaking down those large food molecules into smaller pieces.
So how do they even measure how much acid our stomachs are producing?
There are a couple of ways. One is a direct measurement where they actually collect gastric contents through a nasogastric tube.
A tube down your nose. Yikes.
It's not the most pleasant, no. They take samples before and after giving a substance that triggers acid production.
So they can see how much acid your stomach pumps out in response.
Right, it's basically a challenge test.
I see. So what do they call those measurements?
Basal acid output, or BAO, and maximal acid output, or MAO, gives them a good picture of how your stomach's functioning.
Okay, and you mentioned another method earlier, the indirect one. I think it was called the Diagnex blue test.
Yeah, that one's less invasive. You swallow a special dye that binds to a resin.
And what happens then?
If your stomach's producing enough acid, the dye gets released and absorbed into your bloodstream.
And then what?
It shows up in your urine, which they can test.
Oh, so it's a way to track the acid's journey without the tube.
Exactly.
Probably clever. Now, what about that condition, Zollinger-Ellison syndrome? I think it involves too much stomach acid.
It does, yeah. It's where tumors, usually in the pancreas or duodenum, produce a hormone called gastrin.
Gastrin, and what does that do?
Gastrin stimulates the stomach to produce way too much acid, like the gas pedal gets stuck down.
Oh, so it's constantly producing acid. That sounds like a problem.
Definitely. It can lead to severe ulcers and other digestive issues
How do they diagnose that?
by measuring gastrin levels in the blood.
It's crazy how such a small imbalance can cause such big problems.
It is. Speaking of imbalances, we were talking about blood in the stool earlier.
Yeah, as a sign of ulcers or even cancer, right?
Right, but, it's important to remember that blood in the stool doesn't always mean something serious.
Oh, really? So should we not worry about it?
No, you should always get checked out by a doctor if you notice it, but
But it could be something else.
it could be something as simple as hemorrhoids or a small tear, lots of things.
Okay, so what should someone do if they notice blood in their stool?
See a doctor right away, that's the most important thing.
So they can figure out what's causing it.
Exactly. They'll probably do some tests, like a colonoscopy or an endoscopy.
To get a better look inside.
Right. Early detection is key, like with most health issues.
Absolutely. So, if you notice it, don't panic, but definitely get it checked out.
That's the best approach. Now, I've always wondered, how does our body actually absorb nutrients from the food we eat?
Yeah, that seems like a whole other level of complexity.
It is. Most of the nutrient absorption happens in the small intestine.
Okay, so the stomach breaks down the food, and then the small intestine is where the real magic happens.
You got it. The stomach's like the prep kitchen, and the small intestine is the dining hall.
Where everything gets put to good use.
Exactly. The small intestine has these tiny projections called villi, which increase its surface area dramatically.
So it's like millions of tiny mouths all grabbing nutrients.
That's a great way to put it. And inside each villus, there's a network of blood vessels and lymphatic vessels.
Which transport the nutrients throughout the body.
Exactly. It's a remarkably efficient system.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But what happens when people have trouble absorbing certain nutrients, like vitamin B12? I've heard of that.
Right. Well, one potential cause is pernicious anemia. It's an autoimmune condition where the body attacks the cells that produce intrinsic factor.
Intrinsic factor.
It's a protein that's essential for B12 absorption.
So without it, you can't absorb B12.
Exactly. And that can lead to all sorts of problems, fatigue, anemia, even neurological issues.
Is there a way to test for pernicious anemia?
There is, yeah. It's called the Schilling test. You swallow a radioactive form of B12, and they measure how much gets absorbed.
Interesting. So that's how they figure out if it's an intrinsic factor problem.
Exactly. And once they know the cause, they can recommend the appropriate treatment.
Which is often B12 injections, right? To bypass the absorption issue.
Often, yes. Now, what about fat absorption problems? I think there's a condition called steatorrhea, where people have fatty stools.
Yeah, that sounds unpleasant. What causes that?
Lots of things, actually. Problems with the pancreas, liver, or even the small intestine itself.
So it could be an issue with the enzymes that break down fats, or with how the intestines absorb them.
You got it. And doctors diagnose it by looking at the stool under a microscope or doing a fecal fat test.
A fecal fat test?
Yeah, they're checking how much fat is being lost in the stool instead of being absorbed.
Okay, so once they know what's causing it, they can figure out the right treatment.
Exactly. And remember, we talked about lactose intolerance earlier. That's another example of the body struggling to absorb a specific nutrient.
The sugar in dairy, right?
Lactose, yeah. People with lactose intolerance don't have enough of the enzyme lactase, which breaks it down.
So the lactose just sits there, causing all those uncomfortable symptoms.
Bloating, gas, diarrhea, yeah.
There's a test for that too, isn't there? The hydrogen breath test?
That's the one. You drink a lactose solution and they measure the hydrogen in your breath if the levels are high.
It means your body isn't breaking down the lactose.
Right. Luckily, there are lots of lactose-free options these days, and lactase supplements can help too.
That's good to know. Are there other sugars people have trouble with?
There are a few, yeah, though they're less common. Like sucrase deficiency affects table sugar digestion, and isomaltase deficiency affects certain starches.
So there are a lot of different possibilities.
There are, and often these deficiencies can be diagnosed with tests that look for the specific enzymes in the gut.
Like that D-xylose test you mentioned earlier. What does that measure exactly?
It measures the absorption of monosaccharides, the simplest type of carbohydrate.
Oh, okay. And how does it work?
You drink a solution of D-xylose, and then they measure how much shows up in your blood and urine.
So if the levels are low,
It suggests a problem with monosaccharide absorption in the small intestine.
which could point to a bigger malabsorption issue.
Exactly. Things like celiac disease, Crohn's disease, even some infections.
Wow, it's amazing what they can figure out from these tests.
It is. And this is just a glimpse into the complexity of our digestive system.
It's amazing how much we've learned about the gut in recent years.
And it just keeps getting more fascinating. The more we learn, the more we realize how important it is for our overall health.
Makes you realize we really take it for granted, what our bodies do every day.
It really does. And it all comes back to this when you understand how your stomach works, how it moves, secretes acid, all that.
Yeah, how empties.
It helps you make better choices about what you eat.
You're making me rethink that milkshake I was going to get later.
Well, moderation is key. right? But it's not just about avoiding discomfort. It's
How
about
about optimizing our health? Yeah.
understanding gastric motility. It explains why some foods keep you full longer, why others give you those quick bursts of energy.
And how we absorb nutrients.
Exactly.
So it's not just about feeling good. It's about, like,
It's about being healthy from the inside out.
yeah, exactly. So as we go about our day,
Think about that incredible machine you have, that self-cleaning food
I
processing.
know I will. I'll never look at a plate of food the same way again.
And who knows, maybe this will spark some curiosity, to learn even more about digestion.
I think you're right. I'm definitely going to pay more attention to how my body reacts to different foods now.
That's great. And remember, there's always more to discover.
So keep exploring, keep learning.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the wonders of your own digestive system. Until next time, everyone, stay curious and keep those stomachs happy.